Once you have all of the critical defaults set up for your plan, you'll want to set up defaults for how your plan and your design will look. So far, in our room defaults, we've set up the floor structure and the floor finish, the ceiling structure and the ceiling finish. In the floor defaults, for the first floor level, we set up the ceiling height. Now we'll take a look at wall types, and in our defaults, we'll assign a wall type for each of these wall tools. Under the wall defaults, we'll go to General Wall. In the General Wall defaults, you can determine how the walls will resize. For instance, if you change the width of a wall, you can either lock the outer surface, the main layer of the outside, the wall center, the main layer on the inside, or the inner surface. We'll take a look at all of these surfaces in a moment, but typically you'll want to resize your walls and lock the main layer on the outside. As you're drawing walls or lengthening walls, you have temporary dimensions that will show up. If you don't want the temporary dimensions, you can uncheck this box. You also have automatically generated attic walls. When you build a roof, Chief will generate automatic attic walls that will fill space between the top of the wall at the ceiling height and the roof plane above it. You can turn that off by unchecking this box. You also have walls that will automatically generate to connect an island room. An island room is a room that is isolated inside of another room. Chief will draw an invisible wall or room divider so that it can recognize the inside room versus the outside room. You can turn this off as well by unchecking this box, but it's not recommended. Now we'll take a look at wall types and wall defaults. We'll go to the exterior wall. The exterior wall is the wall type that will be used when you use the exterior wall tool. For the exterior wall type, we'll go down here to Wall Types. Right now it's using the Siding 6 wall. Chief Architect has provided several wall types that we can use. You can use a Siding 4 wall or a Siding 6 wall. The 4 and 6 indicate the size of the framing, 2x4 or 2x6. Chief has also given us stucco walls and brick walls. You can also create your own wall types. We'll start here with the Siding 6 wall and click on Define. That will open up the Wall Type Definition dialog. Here I'm going to copy the Siding 6 wall to create my own. And then I'll rename it. I'll call this Tan Siding 6. When we copied the Siding 6 wall, we started this wall with all of these attributes. These are the wall layers. Layer 1 is Gray 3 siding. That's the exterior side of the wall. Layer number 1 is always the exterior layer. Even for interior walls, Chief recognizes one side as the exterior side and one side as the interior side. This layer is 1/2 inch thick and has a fill of an angled hatch that's pink. It's using the gray siding. The pattern and texture properties of this material are shown here. We can change this. I'll click on Gray Siding and that'll open up my Select Materials dialog and the Library Materials. Here under the Materials folder, I'll scroll down and under the Siding and Paneling folder, we'll go to the Lap subfolder and close the Blues folder, go to the Browns folder, and use our Tan 2 siding. I'll go ahead and click OK here. The second layer is a 0-inch layer of house wrap. Underneath that is 7/16 inch of OSB horizontal. Again, you can change the material by clicking on the material, opening up the library browser, and selecting a different material if you wish. The fourth layer, you'll notice here, is under Main Layers. The main layer of your wall will always be the structural layers, in this case the framing layer. Right now it's using first studs at 24 inches on center and is set for 5.5 inches thick, which will allow for 2x6 framing. Here I'm going to go to the library browser, and in the library browser under Framing I have several selections. These materials are the only materials in Chief Architect that will tell a different part of the program what to do. These tell the framing tool how to frame the wall. Right now it's using first studs at 24 inches on center. I want to use first studs at 16 inches on center. You also have options for steel studs. And you can create your own framing material. I'll go ahead and click OK here, and then I want to change the way this wall looks in floor plan view. Right now the main layer has a blue fill. I'll go to the color here and click, and then go to the color tab to change the layer's color. We'll change it to green and click OK. Now this is what my wall type will look like in floor plan view. The interior layer is drywall of 1/2 inch. Again, you can change the material by clicking on the material name here, and you can change the width by changing this number here. You can also change the line weight that's used for each layer of your wall. In your preview pane, you have options to show the line weight. Right now, the 2 lines for the main layer are heavy lines. The rest of them are thinner lines. If I click on this main layer either in the preview pane or select it here, you can change the line weight for that layer right here. If you're building a brick wall, you have an option to create a brick ledge on your foundation. This will determine the brick ledge depth for this wall type. You also determine which layer you want to build your floor and ceiling platforms to, which layer you want the dimension tool to locate, and which layer you want the foundation to build to. So I've just created a new wall type, and when I click OK here in my exterior wall defaults, I've assigned my new tan siding 6 wall as my exterior wall default. I'll go ahead and click OK. Then I'll go to my interior wall defaults. The interior wall defaults is the wall type that will be used when you use your interior wall tool. We'll go to the wall type, and this is using the interior 4 wall. You also have interior 6 walls. And again, you can create your own by going to the Define button, either creating a new wall or copy this wall and make changes. We'll accept this one as it is and go ahead and click OK. In the Wall Defaults dialog, you have all of the other options for changing how this wall is built, including structure, material, railing options, and label options. However, remember that we are setting up the default for the wall tool, so we will use the attributes that are most common in the plan. You will have all of these options in each wall you place in the plan in each wall's individual wall specification dialog. For now, we'll go ahead and click OK and accept these defaults. You have additional default settings for other wall types. Each of these wall types corresponds with a tool in your Wall Tools parent tool. For instance, the foundation wall, the slab footing, the pony wall, the half wall, the room divider, as well as railing tools under the Railing Tool parent tool. You can change any of these defaults at any time during your design process. Now let's take a look at the door defaults. You can get to the door defaults by clicking on Defaults here, or if you double-click on the door tool in your toolbar, that will open up the door defaults. We'll start here with the interior door. The first thing you'll want to set up is the door style. This door is using a door P04 style that looks like this. You have options here for basic doors, like a slab door or a single panel door. With the single panel door, you have the options here under Panel Frame Options to change the framing around the paneling. For instance, if I change this to 8 inches for the width, when I hit my Tab key, you'll see that the preview pane will update and show a wider panel frame. That's only available with a single panel door. You also have louvered doors, glass doors, or you can go to the library browser and select a door out of the Chief Architect Core catalogs or out of a manufacturer catalog. Under Architectural, we'll go to Doors and Doorways. You have options here for bifold doors, garage doors, glass doors, and panel doors. I'll change this one to this door P05 and click OK. You have options here to change the swing angle. This is the angle that will show in the floor plan view. You have options here to change the size of your most typical interior door. If most of my doors are going to be 2/8 doors, I'll want to change this here. I'll leave the height of the door at 80 inches. You can also set the door's top or bottom relative to the floor. You can set it from the floor that you're placing it on, or from absolute zero, or from the finished floor. When you place a door in a wall, remember that every wall has an interior side and has an exterior side. So when you place the door, these different sides will correspond with your wall. You can reverse that by clicking on this button. Under Options, you can decide if you want your default interior door to be a single door or a double door, or calculate it from the width. If it's calculating from the width, if I change this door to anything wider than 48 inches, it'll automatically change the door to a double door. Under 3D display, you can show your doors opened in camera view or closed in camera view. If you want a double swinging door, you have that option here. If you're going to use glass doors for your default door, you may want to use tempered glass. You also have an option to make this a fire rated door, but again, remember this is your default interior door. You can also recess your doors into the wall, to the main layer or to the sheathing layer. You can also decide in a curved wall if you want a straight door or if you want the door to curve with the wall. Under casing, you decide what the casing or the trim around the outside of the door wants to be. You'll notice here for the interior door that if I set the casing here, this will change both sides of my interior door. If you want one side to be different from the other side, you do have the option under the general panel to separate the trim and materials on each side, in which case you can now set each side to be different casing. For my interior doors, I want them to be the same on both sides. You can change the width and the depth and the reveal of the casing. You can also change the profile of the molding that's being used around the door. If I go to the library browser, into the Chief Architect Core Catalogs, in the Molding subfolder, I have a Door and Window Casing folder. Here I could select a different profile for my door casing. For now, I'll just leave it as the simple rectangular profile. You also have the option to include a sill or threshold with each door, or in this case, for my interior doors, I'll remove it. You have options for double wall as well as the curved wall casing. You can also add a lintel or a different molding across the top of the door. If you have a glass door, you have the option to add divided lights. You also have options for your jamb. You can arch any door. However, be careful when you arch a door that your door style fits in that arch. You can also change the hardware. For my interior doors, I'm using a knob on both sides. You can specifically place the knob in from the door edge and up from the bottom. You can go to the library to select different hardware. You can also add locks and change the hinges. If you go to framing, you decide how you want to frame your interior doors. For the header, right now it's going to use two headers that are 1.5 inches thick. The height is calculated from width. This is set up in your framing defaults. You also decide here how many trimmers you want on each side of the door. For my interior doors, one trimmer will work. You have options for your rough opening allowance. You can also decide what layer you want your doors to go on. For my interior doors, I may want to place my doors on a different layer than my exterior doors. If you go to the Define button, it'll open up your layer display options. Here you can create a new layer, either by clicking on New or click on Copy, and then rename the layer here. You also have the option to change the materials. You have the options to change the hardware material if you want, for instance, brass hardware. You can change that here. You also have options here to change the material for the trim or casing on the interior or the exterior side of the door. For my interior doors, I want them to be the same, so I'll select the exterior side, select Material, go to my Plan Materials, and under Color, I'll select that same bone material that's on the interior side of the trim. The doors themselves are also different on the exterior and interior sides. I'll change this as well to use that same color, bone, on the surface of the door. And you'll notice here that you have an option to change the hardware material, but I've added an accent doorknob, that glass doorknob, so I could change the material of the components of that doorknob here. You also have options for how the label looks in your floor plan view. Right now it's using an automatic label. If you click this button, you can type in a specific label. You can also suppress the label for your doors. You can also offset it. Right now the label is placed right in the center of the opening of the door. If I want to move it, I can type in a different number here and offset it a little ways from the center of the door. You can also change the angle. You have different default settings for all the different door types. For the hinge door, if you place this door on an interior wall, it'll use the interior default. If you use the same tool to place this door on an exterior wall, it'll use the exterior door defaults. The sliding door tool in your toolbar works much the same way. You have interior sliding door defaults and exterior sliding door defaults. If I place a sliding door on an interior wall, it'll place a solid panel door. If I place an exterior sliding door, it'll place a sliding glass door. For my sliding glass door, I might want to add divided lights. Again, you have defaults for the other corresponding tools in the Door Tools toolbar for your doorway, your pocket door, your bifold door, and your garage door. We can also set up the defaults for the windows. If I double-click here on my window tool, it'll open up the window defaults. If I place a window now, it'll place a double-hung window that's 32 wide by 48 high and 80 inches floor to the top. Just like the door, you have other default options, including the casing, adding a lintel, whether you use an interior and/or exterior sill. You have options for the sash, or the jamb of the window, as well as the framing. Here again, you can add divided lights. You can change the shape of a window or change it to an arch window. You also have options for window treatments, like curtains or blinds. You also determine here the framing of your window, what type of header it's going to use, with the exception of the depth, which is set up again in your framing defaults. You also have options for setting up the energy values and which layer the windows will be placed on, as well as the materials and the label options. I'll go ahead and click OK now, and let's assume for the moment that I've started to build my building, but I want to change the defaults. You can select a window or door and many other objects. If I open up this window, you can see that I have all of the same options for the design of this window. I'll go ahead and change the size to a 36 inch. I could change it to a left sliding or right sliding, or an awning window or a hopper window. I'll go ahead and keep the default, which is a single hung window, and then perhaps add some divided lights. And then let's add a different molding for the sill for the exterior side. I'll go to the library browser, go into the Chief Architect Core Catalogs under Architectural and Molding, go to the Windowsills subfolder, and select a different sill shape. We'll go here to the Materials panel, and you'll notice that this accent sill profile that we've used is already assigned a material, color bright. It's the same as the exterior trim material. We'll take a look in a moment at where this material assignment comes from. For now, we'll go ahead and click OK. So I've made some changes to this window, and I've decided that I want to use this window as my default window from now on. Instead of going back into my defaults, I could just select this window and then click on this button in my Edit toolbar at the bottom to set this window as the default. You'll get a message that lets you know that the window defaults have been updated. Now, when I use my window tool again and place another window, it'll place the exact same type of window. This is another way you can set defaults in your plan, and you can change them at any time during your design process. Now let's take a look at a couple of different ways you can assign materials to the different objects in your plan. So we talked a little bit before about the door defaults. If you go to the exterior door defaults and go to the Materials panel, here under Trim for Exterior, if we click on Select Material, you can see that it's using the color bright. If we go to Plan Materials, you can see it says Use Default. This is an indication that it's finding a default set somewhere other than the door defaults. The same goes for the window defaults. If we go to Materials, Exterior Trim, and to the Plan Defaults, this is also using default. It's also the case for the corner trim. If we go into Materials and click on the corner board, under Plan Materials, this too is using a default. We'll go into the default settings. You can see here that we have the corner trim defaults, the door defaults, the window defaults, but we also have Materials defaults. Materials defaults will set up the defaults for several different objects all at one time. For instance, exterior trim. If we go to Select Material here Under the library browser, you can see we're using the color bright. The door, the window, and the corner boards are all getting its material from here. If we go to Plan Materials, you'll notice there is no Use Default option here. The same goes for several different like objects. Under Material Defaults, you have material assignments for all of the cabinet types, for all of the electrical, or for all of the fixtures. So in an Object's Default dialog, under Materials, if you see Use Default under Plan Materials, this is where that default is set.